right, so today we're diving deep into the life and career of Alain Delon.
Ooh, exciting.
You know, for an actor who is so famous for his looks, there's a surprising amount of depth to this guy.
Yeah, and drama, I mean, his life story could be a movie itself.
Right. I mean, you requested this deep dive, so I know you're into classic film.
Huge fan.
And Delon is like French cinema royalty.
Totally.
But as we'll see, there's so much more to him than just a pretty face.
Oh, absolutely. You know, what fascinates me about Delon is that even though he's remembered for his looks, his life was full of these dramatic twists and turns, and it all started with a childhood that was anything but glamorous.
Okay, so let's rewind all the way back. Turbulent beginnings, right?
Yes.
How did his early years shape the man he became?
Well, picture this. Little Alain, born in 1935.
Okay.
Parents divorced when he's just 4 years old.
Wow.
Shuffled between foster families, different schools, no stability.
So he was dealing with a lot at a young age.
Yeah. And you can see echoes of this kind of chaotic upbringing in the characters he plays later on.
Yeah.
You know, often emotionally guarded, withdrawn. It's like that early instability just infused this intensity into his acting.
That's interesting. You know, it's not always clear how an actor's personal life affects their work. But in Delon's case, it seems like those early experiences really did shape his persona.
Absolutely.
But before he's even on a film set, there's another formative experience.
Right.
The French Navy and the First Indochina War.
Right.
And knowing how much you love his Purple Noon, his breakthrough role.
The one that launched him, right?
It really did.
Yeah, Purple Noon. Adaptation of Patricia Highsmith's novel, The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Oh, I love that book.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's this captivating story, deceit, moral ambiguity, chilling charisma. And Delon, he just embodies Tom Ripley.
Really becomes him.
He becomes him, yeah, and with this unsettling charm that you can't take your eyes off of.
I've heard some critics say that Delon was just playing himself in Purple Noon, like typecast, you know?
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, Delon's natural charisma is definitely there.
Yeah.
But I think he brings a depth to Ripley that goes beyond just charm. He captures that manipulative nature, the darkness underneath, and it creates this truly multi-layered performance.
So it's more than just surface level.
Way more.
And the film was a huge success, critically and commercially, and it launched Delon to the forefront of European cinema.
Totally.
Then just a few years later, 1963, he cements his place as a legend with The Leopard.
The Leopard. Okay, this is an epic historical drama.
Huge film.
Lucio Visconti directing. Delon acting alongside giants. Burt Lancaster, Claudia Cardinale.
I mean, you've probably seen clips. It's visually stunning.
Beautiful. And Delon, breathtaking performance.
I've heard it said that The Leopard made him synonymous with French cinema. Would you agree?
Definitely. I mean, it catapulted him to international fame, made him one of the most sought-after actors of his generation. But you know what?
What?
Delon was far from a one-trick pony.
Right. Let's get into that. He was known for his range.
His range was remarkable.
So let's dive into some of those roles that show off his versatility. He wasn't afraid to tackle different genres, was he?
No, not at all. Let's start with Rocco and His Brothers, also came out in 1960.
Oh, wow. Same year as Purple Noon.
Powerful drama, family, loyalty, tragedy, all set against post-war Italy. Imagine yourself transported to that time, that place, the grit, the desperation. You can almost feel it. And Delon's performance as Rocco, the moral center of the family, is just raw and moving.
It sounds intense.
It stays with you long after the credits roll.
Then Le Samouraï in 1967, directed by Jean-Pierre Melville.
Oh, yes.
Master of French noir. And this film, it's just iconic. What makes his portrayal of the hitman so compelling?
He plays Jeff Costello, this solitary, almost mythical hitman, and he does it with this cool precision, economy of movement that's just mesmerizing, but there's this underlying vulnerability too.
Like hidden depths.
Exactly, and it's that duality, that complexity that makes his characters so fascinating.
Okay, and we can't forget La Piscine, 1969, a really sensual psychological drama where he stars alongside Romy Schneider. And, you know, you can't talk about this film without mentioning their real-life romance.
Oh, right. That chemistry, electric.
It must have just added fuel to the fire of their public image.
Totally. The film itself is a classic, and it showcases another side of Delon's talent.
Really shows his range.
Absolutely a must-see for any Delon fan.
And that same year, he's in The Sicilian Clan. I mean, this really shows he can do action, crime thrillers, and bring that same intensity he had in his dramatic roles.
Oh, he nails it.
Yeah.
He's totally believable as Roger Sarté, this cunning, ruthless criminal. And it reminds us that Delon wasn't afraid to explore, to push those boundaries. He could be charming, dangerous, vulnerable, you name it.
He really ran the gamut.
He did.
Yeah.
But, he wasn't just interested in these darker roles. He was drawn to complex characters, the morally ambiguous ones.
Right.
And that led him to Mr. Klein in 1976, a haunting tale set in Nazi-occupied France.
Okay, Mr. Klein. This is a masterpiece.
It really is. It stays with you. Delon plays Robert Klein, a man caught in this web of mistaken identity during a truly horrific period in history.
John.
And his performance, it captures that growing fear, the desperation. He's trying to prove his innocence.
It's a really powerful story.
Oh, and it earned him a Caesar Award for Best Actor. Well-deserved.
So clearly Alain Delon was way more than just a pretty face.
Oh,
He was a dedicated artist who really crafted his roles with incredible depth.
absolutely. And his life off-screen, just as compelling. Filled with these passionate romances and this drive to build a legacy beyond acting.
Okay, this is really interesting.
It's fascinating. I think you'll really enjoy this next part.
All right, we've covered a lot. Why don't we take a moment to absorb all that, and when we come back, we'll explore the man behind the mask, his personal life, his ventures beyond the world of cinema.
I can't wait.
Okay, so we've talked about Delon's rough childhood, his incredible rise to fame, and how versatile he was as an actor. But there's another piece to this puzzle, right? His personal life. I think you'll find this really interesting, especially with your interest in, the human side of these larger-than-life figures.
It's definitely as dramatic as any of his movies. I mean, his romances were legendary, especially with Romy Schneider.
Oh, Romy Schneider, what a story.
Right. It totally captivated the public, intense passion, but also, heartbreak in the end. It's like a movie in itself. And I bet their on-screen chemistry, like in La Piscine, just added to the public fascination with their real-life relationship.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it was a whirlwind, exhilarating highs and crushing lows. It's interesting, right, how often that kind of intense passion goes hand in hand with creative people.
Yeah, and even though it ended, their relationship definitely left a mark on both of them.
No doubt.
And later, Delon married Natalie Delon, and they had a son, Anthony.
Right. Another layer of intrigue in his already, fascinating personal life. They were this glamorous couple, but even that ended in divorce. Yeah. It really makes you think about how tough it is to keep relationships going under the spotlight, all that pressure.
Always being watched. But here's what I find interesting. Despite all the ups and downs in his relationships, Delon always talked about how important family was to him.
Yeah.
It almost seems like a contradiction, right? Because his public image was always this lone wolf. It is. It's fascinating, right? He called himself a lone wolf, but family was like this anchor for him. He had 4 kids total, and even with the inevitable ups and downs, he stayed close with them. It shows a depth, a commitment to family that you might not expect.
So we've got this picture, right? Difficult childhood, rise to stardom, diverse roles, complex personal life. But there's this other side to Alain Delon that often gets missed. His business sense. This might surprise you, but he wasn't just an artist. He was a pretty savvy entrepreneur.
Yeah. Delon understood the power of his image, and he built the successful brand. Perfumes, watches, accessories. He had this impeccable taste, and he turned it into a real empire.
Like he created a brand out of his own style. Do you think that surprised people?
Maybe those who only knew him from his movies? It speaks to another side of him. Ambition, creativity, and this desire to build something that would last, something beyond acting. He wasn't content to just be a face on screen. He wanted to create.
And speaking of legacy, he did rack up quite a few awards, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He won a César Award, which is basically the French Oscar Best Actor for Mr. Klein. And then in 2019, he got the Palme d'Honneur at Cannes,
Wow.
which is a Lifetime Achievement Award, recognizing his huge contributions to cinema. It's one of the biggest honors in film, It's not just about one performance, it's about a whole career devoted to acting.
That's amazing. From a troubled kid to an international icon, recognized for his art and his business smarts. But he didn't totally disappear after getting those awards, did he?
No, he kind of gradually retired from acting, fewer films after the 90s, but his impact is undeniable. He's a legend. His performances, that look in his eyes, his effortless style, they still inspire people today. And he's been pretty open about aging, about death, about the wisdom that comes with living a full life. It gives you a glimpse into the man behind the image, someone who experienced incredible success, but also personal struggles.
It sounds like he always kept people's attention. You know, earlier you mentioned how he often talked about feeling lonely. I think that's a really interesting thread to pull on, especially when you think about the psychology of fame, which I know you're interested in.
Definitely. I mean, here's a guy who had it all: fame, success, wealth. But he often talked about this deep sense of solitude. It's like the thing he was seeking, the recognition, somehow led to this feeling of being alone, even surrounded by fans.
Yeah, it's strange, right? Like wanting fame, wanting to be validated by others could actually lead to more loneliness. It makes you wonder about the real price of fame, what you have to give up to get it. Do you think this feeling of being alone was just part of who Delon was? Or did it come from the life he chose, the path he took?
That's a tough one. It could be a little of both, right? His childhood, the instability, not having those strong relationships early on, maybe that contributed to a sense of detachment. And then being an actor, always in the public eye, that can create a distance between the person and the image. You know, always being watched, having to maintain this persona, it can make it hard to really connect with people.
Okay, so we've explored so much of Alain Delon's life, his career, the highs and lows, the good and the bad. But there's this big question that always seems to come up. And it's a question that Delon himself struggled with.
Oh, totally.
What does it all mean?
Right. It's that thing, you know, when you look at someone who's achieved so much fame, success, and you wonder.
Like, what's the point of it all?
Yeah. And for Delon, even with all the adoration, the wealth, he often talked about feeling alone.
It's almost a paradox, right?
It is.
Like, chasing fame and validation could lead to feeling more isolated.
Exactly.
It really makes you think about what you have to sacrifice for that kind of recognition.
Yeah, the cost of it all.
Do you think this loneliness was just part of Delon's personality? Or was it a consequence of, you know, the life he lived?
It's a great question. Maybe both. I mean, think about his childhood.
Right. So rough.
So unstable, not having those strong, loving relationships early on. It could have made it hard for him to really connect with people.
And then being an actor,
Right.
It's all about image. You can put up a wall between the real person
Yeah.
and the public persona.
Totally. Constantly being watched, having to be on all the time. It makes it tough to just be yourself.
So even with all the success, the talent, there can still be this inner turmoil,
Absolutely.
this search for something more.
It makes those bigger than life figures more relatable, you know?
You start to see them as human beings, not just icons.
Yeah, they have struggles too.
Do you think when Delon talked about this feeling of loneliness, did it resonate with his audience?
Oh, I think so. It made him vulnerable, you know?
Yeah.
Like under that cool, handsome exterior, there was this fragility.
It makes him more real.
Exactly. It makes him more human, but it also kind of adds to the mystery.
Right. It's complex.
And I think it resonated because we all want to connect with others, to find meaning.
It's a universal thing.
We all want something that goes beyond the fleeting nature of fame, you know?
It brings us back to why we're having this conversation in the first place.
Right.
It's not just about the movies or the awards. It's about understanding who Alain Delon really was.
The man behind the image.
The complexities, the search for meaning.
Yeah.
As we wrap this up, what do you think his legacy is? What will he be remembered for?
He'll be remembered for those incredible performances.
Oh, absolutely.
In those iconic films, but also, I think for his honesty,
Yeah.
for talking about the downsides of fame, that loneliness.
It's not something people usually talk about.
He didn't shy away from it. He showed us a glimpse of what it's really like, and I think that's powerful.
It reminds us that success doesn't solve everything.
Right.
That even those who seem to have it all still struggle.
We're all human. We all have those moments.
I hope this deep dive gave you a deeper appreciation for Alain Delon.
Me too.
Not just as an actor, but as a person, as a man who lived a really full, really complex life.
I think he was a true cinematic icon, but more than that, he was a human being who was honest about his experiences, about the good and the bad.
That's a great way to put it. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the world of Alain Delon.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating deep dive.